air pollution matter, etc. Supreme Court Lawyers Association also provides free legal help to the needy. Now, before proceeding, let me introduce all of you from our Supreme Court Women Lawyers team. So first, let me introduce to you our most dynamic president, Ms. Mahalakshmi Pavni, senior advocate, and a very energetic too. Then we have a very dignified Bhakti Pasreja, the vice president, a very energetic Priyanka Mathur, the vice president. Then our other and very dedicated and responsible team members, we have Ms. Mansa Singh, assistant secretary, Ms. Sudha Pal, treasurer, Ms. Subhra Saha, assistant treasurer, and last but not least, our own member, executive committee member, Mahir Ravi Shrain. We all work together to fulfill the motto, and such is the determination that we did not prefer to sit idle during the current unprecedented situation due to COVID pandemic. Rather, we decided to re-energize the minds of our intellectual thoughts, and for this, we have started webinar series on through this webinar on some of the very relevant and thought-provoking topics which are of national importance and generate an obvious curiosity in all of us. Today's topic, unfolding the enigma of reservation, is no different. I'm not going in detail of the topic as we have our keynote speaker, Ms. Vibha Datta Makheja, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. And she is one of the most competent personalities to explain this topic in details. I extend my warm welcome to Vibha ma'am. And now, without delaying any further, I will request Executive Member Ms. Mahir Ravi Shrain to introduce our main speaker to the audience. Mahir Ravi, please. Mahir Ravi.
Thank you, Prerna ma'am. A very warm welcome to everyone here. Very good evening to Vibha ma'am. Vibha ma'am, as we all know, Ms. Vibha Datta Makheja is a senior advocate designated by the Supreme Court of India. In 2013, she got designated and she joined the bar in 1992 as an associate of late Shri Arun Jaitley ji, former Finance Minister of India, and now as an extensive practice at the Supreme Court. She was appointed as the vice chairperson of the NADA panel in November 2019 and is currently serving as the chairperson of NADA appellate panel since November 2019. She was appointed standing counsel for the state of Madhya Pradesh in the year 2010 and continued so till she was designated in 2013. She has previously served as a member of the National Legal Services Authority from 2013 to 2015. She is also actively involved in legal services activities of NALSA and the Supreme Court Legal Services Committee. Ms. Makheja is also active in the gender sensitization activities of the Supreme Court. It was pursuant to the writ petition filed by her and Ms. Beena Tamta that the gender sensitization rules were framed and the Gender Sensitization Committee was set up in the Supreme Court. She completed her undergraduate studies from Lady Shri Ram College for Women, New Delhi, and obtained her LLB degree from the Campus Law Center, New Delhi. She obtained her master's in law from Georgetown University Law Center, Washington, D.C., and currently serves as a member of the Asian Law Alumni Advisory Board of the university. I welcome you, ma'am, on behalf of SQALA, and I'm looking forward to a very enlightening and an engaging event this evening. Prerna, ma'am.
Yeah. I will request our President, Ms. Mahalakshmi Pavni ji, to give a welcome speech.
Very good evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to my dear friend, Ms. Vibha Datta Makheja, who is going to enlighten us on this topic for today in today's webinar, Unfolding the Enigma of Reservation. Before I tell you what the topic is, I would also want to tell you that my dear friend Vibha has the rare distinction of being the third woman of this country to be designated by the Honorable Supreme Court, and she was the youngest. So I'm very, very happy for her, and happy to note that she has agreed, consented, and to be part of this evening's webinar. So, unfolding the enigma of reservations. What exactly is it? It's a reservations of the Constitution. The rule of law is a founding principle in the constitutional framework of India. It's a country which endeavors to establish a constitutional democracy, and the rule of law becomes a pertinent proponent on which democracy can thrive. If it is not heeded, democracy fails. If it is abandoned. So the very heart of the democratic body, every democratic body which nurtures the principles of rule of law it is the soul. So equality of individuals is the guiding lamp and a fundamental pillar which strengthens the implementation of the rule of law. The concept of equality as it stands conspicuously in the Constitution also prescribes that treatment of unequals as equal. This is only to extol and embrace the true spirit of the Constitution, which is to treat individuals in need of social support with greater understanding and much greater compassion. Such socially handicapped individuals are left helpless due to a history of economic, social, and cultural subjugation, and hence the Constitution makes this very makes a special provision for safeguarding their interests and to ameliorate their difficulties. The rule of law and equality under our Constitution are designed in such a way it has to enhance the virtue of a more just, fair, equitable, non-arbitrary society with replete opportunities to the unequals whose existence prior to the forming of Constitution or prior to independence was marred with struggle and subjugation. And even before the British invasion, they were subjected to so much of, casteism, communism, and, it was actually under the shackles of the Brahminical order or the caste system or the Varnas. Varnas, we have the 4 Varnas, that is the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. So to eliminate this, this was brought in. So Article 16 of the Constitution is a direct consequence of the deep malaise of caste system that has prevailed systematically and intergenerationally in India. It is also a substantial provision in pursuance of conveying the essence and meaning of Article 14. If it is undone, in text, every obstacle that would come in the way of ensuring equality, it reinforces the fact that while considering a citizen for employment, the state has to disregard considerations based on race, caste, creed, gender, sex, place of birth, place of residence. So this is very important when it comes to opportunities, equal opportunities in jobs. So, and it enables the Parliament to enact special laws pertaining to employment for weaker or deprived or vulnerable sections and communities, especially the scheduled tribes and scheduled castes. And it also ensures that Parliament, there is adequate representation of castes and classes, but representation may be insufficient. So this is how actually the reservations came into effect. They constitute a special provision, and income is not included in this criteria because the roots of this forward and backward divide lie in that value system. I remember I told you all the Brahminical system, social order. So that was the divide. There was nothing about rich and poor. It was actually based on caste divide. And after this, there has been an exponential growth, in the law of reservation, right from the trajectory traversed from the Indra Sahni case to Nagraj's case and BK Pavitra's case. That is the latest 2019 BK Pavitra versus State of Karnataka. So, and these cases have had it so much of stance, abated judicial stance on reservation. So from reservation in educational institution for SC, ST, OBCs to reservations in jobs and to reservations in high public offices, everything has changed. And there is a changing barometer, the barometer for measuring backwardness now is financial depravity and evolution of the creamy layer to evaluating whether reservations should be made while considering them for a promotional post. The reservation policy debate, in fact, has been a roller coaster ride. In fact, Mansa Singh told me that, ma'am, this is a very controversial topic. Yes, it is indeed controversial, but my dear friend Vibha is going to enlighten our audience, and then she's going to tell us what are the misgivings and what are the shortcomings of this reservation as a whole. So in Indra Sahni's case, before I go pass on the platform to Bhakti, I just want to tell you, see, in Indra Sahni's case, a fundamental question was raised, whether in a secular society envisioned in the constitution, identification of backward class on the basis of caste was permissible. And the majority judges held that identification on basis of caste was permissible, and that constitutionality, there was no restriction on identification of backwardness of classes. Now, what happens? I want to, in fact, cite I cite Nani Palkiwala, a very eminent jurist and one of the top lawyers of our country, what he had to say on reservations, after the Indra Sahni's judgment came out. So I want to quote him. Yeah. See, Mr. Nani Palkiwala had to say in reaction to Indra Sahni's judgment, he said, and I quote, "The basic structure of the constitution envisages a cohesive, unified, casteless society. By breathing new life into casteism, the judgment fractures the nation and disregards the basic structure of the constitution. The decision to revitalize casteism, cleave the nation into two forward and backward, and open new vistas for internecine conflicts and fissiparous forces, and make backwardness a vested interest. It will undo whatever has been achieved since independence towards creating a unified, integrated nation. The majority judgments will revive casteism, which the constitution emphatically intended to end, and the pre-independence tragedy would be reenacted with the rules reversed. The erstwhile underprivileged would now become the privileged." So that is what the great eminent jurist Nani Palkiwala had to say. And the growth from this public factious judgment has led to further growth in litigation and from time to time concerning the slew of reservation policies undertaken by state legislatures and parliaments. And obviously, these parliamentarians, they make a lot of promises to our electorate, the voters, and there have been uprisings and people demanding reservations. And in the name of reservations, the politicians they divide the entire society to castes, and and there's a lot of fighting and dharnas and things like that. And before I invite Vibha to speak on this topic, I request my dear Vice President Bhakti Pasrija Sethi to speak about the topic and tell our audience what exactly is reservation, although I have thrown some light on this subject. Over to Bhakti.
A very good evening to all of you. Thank you so much, dear President ma'am. Our distinguished keynote speaker for today, Vibha ma'am, my friends in EC, Prerna, Priyanka, Mahir Ravish, Mansa, Sudha, Shubhra, and all the friends who have joined us today on social platform Facebook Live. It's my privilege to introduce the topic of today's discussion, unfolding the enigma of reservation, to all of you. Today, our august audience comprises not only of lawyers, but it consists of people from all walks of life who have their own bittersweet experiences of reservation, which is also known as quota system in general parlance. So I will amalgamate in my introduction of the topic both the general and societal implications and the legal aspects of the matter. In fact, all of us have witnessed around us the implications of quota system and have some story to tell. We have seen candidates belonging to unreserved categories feeling sad and disheartened when they are left out by a fraction of a mark in an entrance exam to some educational institute or a job selection. We have also seen happiness of those blessed ones who had comparatively lesser marks but are selected because they belong to reserved categories. Before I delve further into the subject, I would like to show you a small clipping from a short film called Reserved Nation. It's a small film which will throw some light. So, admin, please enable screen sharing. Let me permit to share my screen. Admin, please enable screen sharing. Yeah, I can do it now.
It's not audible.
Bhakti ma'am, increase the volume, please.
Not audible. Not audible at all.
It's not audible.
No.
Audible.
So please let us finish because they have taglines also. Well, well, we have seen this short clipping. So even though maybe it was not audible to some, am I audible now?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm audible. So in fact, when I was watching this clipping, two lines from Elton John's song "Candle in the Wind" came to my mind. And they are like, it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, not knowing who to cling when the rain set in. The plight of the first boy belonging to the general category in the clip, who got a good rank, still he could not get any seat in MD. his plight is only like a candle in the wind who doesn't know who to cling. Whereas his friend who belongs to reserved category, he got plush general medicine seat even with rank of 1650. So is it justified to make meritorious student walk on a rocky terrain for eternity? I feel today, after 70 years of independence, there is a dire need to review the existing laws relating to reservation in India pragmatically and on scientific basis so that real merits are not compromised in any way. Now, let's now travel to why the need of reservation arose. After India attained independence from the British rule in 1947, our founding fathers, the drafting team headed by Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar, realized that due to the age-old system, caste system in India, some castes and communities who had faced societal injustice lagged behind others and required a special assistance to come at par with others. Therefore, as a short-term measure of 10 years, the concept of reservation was coined to level the playing field. Here it is to be noted that it was only a short-term measure, which was to be only for 10 years, to make some kind of equality so that the people who were behind, they may come at par. However, when the Constitution of India came into force in 1950, it contained articles like Article 15, Article 16, Article 29, Clause 2 in Part 3, that is fundamental rights, and Article 46 in the directive principles of the state policy, Part 4. Article 15.1 said that the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. Article 16, as we all know, provided for equality in public employment. Article 29, Clause 2 prohibited discrimination in matters of admission into educational institutions only on grounds of religion, race, caste, language, or any of them. In 1951, a lady, Srimati Champakam Dorai Rajan, challenged a pre-independence government order, which was invoked by the Medical College in Madras, where she wanted admission, to refuse admission to her on the ground that she belonged to an upper caste, though she had got higher marks. She challenged it before the Madras High Court, where it was held that caste cannot be basis of discrimination. The matter eventually came to Supreme Court of India. It was challenged by the state. A seventh bench of 7 judges heard the matter and came to the unanimous conclusion that allocation of seats on basis of caste was violative of Articles 15, Clause 1 and Article 29(2) of the Constitution of India. The judgment sparked a new controversy and led to the First Amendment to the Constitution of India. In statement of objects and reasons of the First Amendment, it was observed that Article 46 provides that states should take care of educational and economic interests of weaker sections and protect them from injustice. A new subclause 4 was then added to Article 15, which said nothing in Article 15 or in Clause 2 of Article 29 shall prevent the state from making any special provision for advancement of some classes. Although there are many cases pursuant to this matter, but as our president ma'am also mentioned, the dominant case which requires a special mention here is of 1993, the famous Mandal Commission case, Indira Sahni versus Union of India. In this matter, the Honorable Supreme Court capped the total reservation to 50% of all the reserved categories, and 50% was left to the general category. The Honorable Court in this matter held that backward classes of citizens in Article 16, Clause 4 of the Constitution of India can be identified on basis of caste system and not only on economic basis, which I feel this thing needs review, because it was held by the Honorable Court that the backward classes have to be identified on basis of caste system. So we feel the the people who really need reservation and who are economically weaker section, they are not getting their dues. Recently, on April 22nd, 2020, a 5-judge constitution bench of the Apex Court, led by Justice Arun Mishra, struck down the government order issued by Andhra Pradesh, which provided 100% reservation for members of scheduled tribes for teaching jobs in scheduled areas. The court said the proposition of 50%, which was laid down in Indira Sahni matter, it was perfectly fine. Also, last month only, Honorable Justice L. Nageshwar Rao, in a matter observed that right to reservation is not a fundamental right. Lordship also expressed a genuine wonder and surprise that all the political parties were united in that particular matter last month, and they were favoring reservation in medical and dental colleges in Tamil Nadu, which I felt it was due to the reason that all the political parties were only concerned with the vote factor and were ignoring the need of quality and merits like they always do. In 1942, US Supreme Court in the matter of H. Biasi versus United States held that distinctions between citizens only because of their ancestry are by their very nature odious to free people whose institutions are founded upon doctrine of equality. In United States also, there used to be discrimination between whites and blacks, which has gradually been eliminated. In fact, today, developed nations like United States, United Kingdom, Australia, they are so much passionate about their progress of their nation that they invite brightest students from all over the world by granting them scholarships and good jobs. And what we are doing, we are ignoring our own meritorious students. Then we complain that we are dependent for the best technologies and best things upon other countries. When we will ignore our meritorious students, only this is bound to happen. Here, I remember a phrase from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, where Cassius said to his friend Brutus, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but it is in ourselves." Dear politicians, please pause and ponder. It's high time that quota system is reviewed. The educational assistance and financial assistance may be given to those who are still disadvantaged. But when it comes to appointments and selection to colleges or selection for jobs, merits should be the only criteria. Thank you. Now I would request Vibha ma'am to please address.
Good evening, everyone. This was wonderful. I actually, both of you between Mahalakshmi and Bhakti, the whole overview of the Indian judicial action on reservation has been taken care of. So actually, I feel that all of us, at least all of you who are there with me in the webinar, are very well aware of most of the reservation issues. So today, what I want to do is to go into the philosophy of reservation, the justiciability of reservation. In as much as the question that I want to address today is whether the Constitution has while providing reservation, is doing a disservice to the nation or is trying to set a balance between the inequities that run very deep in our country. So just rewinding back to before independence, the fact of the matter is that our caste system is as old as 2000 years. So the caste system's roots are so strongly entrenched in our country. And actually our country is the only country which has a caste system. Discrimination on basis of caste, that is in direct connection to where you are born, is only unique to our country. Issues like nepotism or belonging to a particular family are universal in all nations. However, the benefits and also the disadvantages of caste, which are connected to us only by virtue of birth, are unique in our country. And now we have a formalized system of caste, which creates distinctions between classes of people on basis of their birth and originally on the basis of various parameters of which the occupation of the caste was the most important parameter. Naturally, a couple of the castes were higher and a couple of the castes were lower. In this scenario, where the higher castes were in an extremely advantageous position and they continued to oppress the lower castes, we had a lot of issues and problems, and the oppression ran so deep in our country that it did not lead to any development. The oppression was something which actually helped the imperial authority to take control over our country. It was in this background, which was of caste-ridden, background where we had issues of communalism, the background where we had issues of gender discrimination at a very large scale, that the constitution makers had debates for over 2 years to come through with a document which would take care of each and every issue of this country. And though there is a lot of criticism about our constitution being a cut and paste constitution of practically every other constitution of the world at that time, mainly the US, the Australian, the UK, the Japanese constitution. I feel that our constitution is the most valuable document and the most vibrant document, because it was after 2 years of extensive debates on each and every aspect that the constitution came through. The founding fathers were at pains to ensure that each and every value of rule of law, of equality, of non-discrimination should all be finding a place in the constitution. And it was in this background that they gave a special status to fundamental rights. In fact, fundamental rights are not even a part of the constitutional document of US. So something as grave as that is a part of the statute or came through by amendments to the constitution, was not a part of the original constitution. In that scenario, when our constitution provides for such strong protections against inequality and oppression, we need to know why we want to protect these people and why are the oppressed classes deserving of this protection. So therefore, from an elitist point of view, it all depends on where you are viewing the situation from. It depends on your perspective. If you sit in a position where you come from a privileged class, it is very difficult to understand the decades and centuries of discrimination that have taken place against you. In fact, even today, when we are close to a century to our independence, I mean, we are just 27 years away from that, we still have the issue of caste as one of our biggest problems in the country. The constitution makers had thought that within 10 years, we will get rid of the caste issue. But unfortunately, the caste issue has been kept alive. Whether it has been kept alive or is it such a part of our social structure that it has been so difficult to break it, that it is continuing to be an issue, is again something that we must examine. So depending on where you are standing, for example, if you take a Dalit person whose family for centuries have had no facilities, no money, no background to get education, it will take generations for his family to get to an education level that a person coming from a privileged class will have. When we look around ourselves in our own personal cases, we are always very willing to say that this person has these facilities, these advantages, he's blue-blooded, that's why he became a judge, that's why he's become a senior, that's why he's become this, he's become that. What is the reason? That's because those advantages are interwoven in your social, economic, and educational backgrounds. So caste is about being born in a particular, caste. There's a class only. So when you are born in that caste, you are automatically given some advantages or automatically face some disadvantages. It is for that affirmative action that our constitution makers protected it very, very strongly. to make sure that a government which will have an ideology, many a times there are majoritarian governments. We have seen two very big majoritarian governments who are carrying on their agenda. Should that being the case, the legislative body will be dictated by the majority of the legislation. The majority may be elitist, the majority may be from a different, from an oppressed class, for example, in Tamil Nadu. The majority is not of the elitist section. So the constitution provided these safeguards to ensure that the legislation, which has a moral authority to maintain equality and rule of law, will not go beyond a particular boundary line in which it will ignore these interests. Democracy is not about majority. Democracy is about conflict groups. It is about groups having different interests who are in conflict with each other. It is about balancing all the conflicting interests and ensuring that every section of the society has a place in the entire democracy. It is with this objective that reservation provisions have been given a constitutional status. There are a lot of issues where there is only a statutory protection. But with regard to reservations, the protection, or in a way to say, the advantage has been constitutionally given to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, because scheduled castes and scheduled tribes have a protection under Article 341 and 342. The lists are to be notified, and that constitutional protection to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes is because of the reason of the historical oppression to these classes of persons, which has not reversed even now. It is only when the oppression and the disadvantage will reverse that the justification of reservation will go. Therefore, today, as Bhakti said, that poor fellow studied well. He did much better than his friend. His friend got 1650, but because he came from a particular class, he got the seat. Do we even realize that for the last 1,000 years, we have deprived those people from even coming close to schools and colleges? They were not allowed to even get an education. So is it not a very small thing for us to give space for them to understand and to be able to come into the mainstream? These changes take time. And as our constitution makers had envisaged 10 years, we can see from our own experience that it is not 10 years and it is going to take even longer. This issue is not only with India. On basis of caste, yes, but on basis of disadvantaged groups, it is all over the world. Today, George Floyd's death in the US, in New York, what does that signify? It clearly signifies the supremacy of a particular race. So also suicides of all the Dalit students who have, the Hyderabad student, Rohit Vellamma, and there is also a recent suicide of that girl. Yes, Mahalakshmi. So the issue is different. The issue is not that a person with higher marks has been deprived of an admission to the school. If the resources are there, everyone can have a stake on the resources. But the problem arises because our resources are very few. Today we have a handful, we have a mushrooming of educational institutions. The private institutions have come in. But in proportion to our population, we still don't have enough educational institutions. So therefore, there is still a fight. Why is there a fight to get into premier institutions? In fact, most of us, we are all parents of young children. We all realize that our children are never going to get admission until and unless they really slog it and they make it to the merit list on top. So that being the situation, it is important for us to understand that reservation serves a purpose. And reservation, which is a type of affirmative action, is taken in several ways. The Constitution under Article 15(1) clearly bans any kind of discrimination. It is a clear-cut ban. It says that there is a prohibition and that prohibition is absolute. It is later that there are exceptions which are made to Article 15(1). That there will be a reservation for women, that there will be laws which can be made in favor of women and children. There will be laws which can be made for SC, STs. There will be laws which can be made for other backward classes and for any other disadvantaged categories. So therefore, when we talked of Champakam Dorairajan, that was at a point of time when the amendments to Article 15 and 16 hadn't come through. So the barometer was Article 14. So the question that arose over there was whether a separate class can be created. Now the big problem that arises, which is the issue of debate, whether a class can be created on basis of caste only. So when Kaka Kalelkar's commission was constituted in 1953, they found that there were castes as many as 2,500 backward classes. So majority of the country was backward. So the problem with that report was that it could never be implemented because the reality that it showed that it was only a very small group, which was the advantaged group, controlled everything, and actually the majority was a backward majority. And therefore the whole heat about Mandal Commission, and that's why VP Singh took it upon himself to enforce the Mandal Commission report, to say that there are still large sections of backward people, and their backwardness has the direct nexus to their caste. So a caste which necessarily exhibits that they are economically backward, they are socially backward, and they are educationally backward. These are the three parameters to consider a particular caste backward. So it is not that a caste, if you belong to a particular caste, you automatically become backward. There is a barometer which has been built up, where a caste has to meet all these three criteria to become a backward caste. In contradistinction, SCs and STs are already identified and they are already a part of a schedule which comes out of the Constitution. So there is no dispute about their backwardness. Their backwardness is verified and is constitutionally acknowledged. So SCs and STs stand on a different footing. OBCs stand on a slightly lower footing in as much as they don't have a constitutional protection. They get their affirmative action through statutes which cannot be challenged as ultra vires the Constitution. So the Constitution allows the Parliament to make laws, to take affirmative action with regard to these castes, which may be determined. So they have to be determined. And that's what Nagaraj said. It said that every time there has to be a quantifiable determination of the backwardness. And that is what Justice Nariman clarified in Jarnail Singh. Now let's examine Jarnail Singh, for example. Now, Jarnail Singh is penned by Justice Nariman, whom we all perceive coming not from a backward class, does not have any, ideological bias in favor of a backward class. However, his constitutional principles are absolutely clear. In the judgment which is authored by him, he very clearly examines the entire scheme of the Constitution. and goes on to say that it is the Constitution, and I'm not willing to tinker with the Constitution. It is the Constitution which puts SC, ST on a constitutional platform, and therefore their backwardness is already determined. And their quantifiable data every time does not have to be proved by the state wherever it makes a reservation law. However, OBCs are not having the same protection. So quantifiable data has to be taken in case, and the state has to justify every time it makes a law in favor of a particular backward class. Why is it backward in a particular state? Now, for example, in Punjab, you'll be surprised to know that 58% of the population is backward. They are backward in, and they are SCs. I'm sorry, they are not backward, they are scheduled castes, not backward classes. So the majority of the state has backward classes in comparison, scheduled castes in comparison to the rest of the country. So these are parameters which have been judicially developed. And there is a lot of criticism of the Supreme Court that they play in the hands of the politicians. The politicians keep these issues alive. But Supreme Court goes only by the Constitution. And so far, I don't think I have come across a judgment on reservation where the Supreme Court has held contrary to constitutional provisions, in as much as whatever has been held so far, wherever they have upheld the reservation policy of a particular state or parliament, there they have followed the constitutional mandate. And that is why they were at pains to try and understand how do we resolve this conflict, because after all, as a judicial body, you're also anxious about, you're looking forward into the future and seeing the impact of your judgment. So it was very difficult for them to give the Indrasani judgment. And that's why they came up with the creamy layer formula. Because they said that the reasoning of the constitutional provisions is that because of your backwardness, you have not been able to get certain advantages. Therefore, reservation in posts, therefore reservation in educational institutions. But the moment you overcome the backwardness, then you are no longer entitled. And therefore, because of that, the creamy layer principle came up. And again, that's a judge made, what should I say? It's a watermark that is made by the judges, where they create a distinction. They tell you that what is the reasoning for a particular law and why is it valid in a particular boundary and what is that boundary. Similarly, the fact that they held that, what was I going to mention? One was with regard to the 50%. So the 50% benchmark is not under the Constitution. It's not a statutory provision. Now it comes into the statutes because Supreme Court has said above 50%, it is not reservation. It is reverse discrimination. So therefore, the 50% benchmark is again a boundary, which is a guiding boundary set by the Supreme Court to come to a conclusion as to how much advantage can be given to people. So now, talking about backward classes, there are a large number of other kinds of reservations. This is known as vertical reservation. These are constitutionally protected vertical reservations. There is another kind of reservation which is known as horizontal reservation. So the horizontal reservation basically is giving preference to particular categories who also have had some disadvantages, but those disadvantages have not been that big. So women, for example, women. Now women consistently, as discrimination against women is as bad as discrimination against castes. So therefore, and it historically goes back actually as much. So till today, the 108th Amendment, which was moved, the bill that was moved to give 33% reservation to women in Lok Sabha seats, has not come back. That was moved, I think, in 2008 or something. It's been years and years. It has not been passed. Why has it not been passed? Is it that what the women are asking for and it's constitutionally permissible because Article 15 says that there should be laws which should be made specially for women and children? So why do women ask for reservation? Why do women ask for being given certain advantages? That is because they have been disadvantaged historically for so long that unless they are given that advantage, they will never have an opportunity to occupy a particular space. So keeping that in mind, women are there, physically handicapped people are there, there are retired persons and pensioners from armed forces. These are sections of societies which are given opportunities to compete. It is like making up a disadvantage that they have suffered. So it gives them a little bit of a fillip that, all right, you come to a particular level and then you determine, then you fight neck to neck, then there is no problem. So as we have seen in our Supreme Court itself, till 2013, 62 years of Supreme Court, only 2 senior advocates were women. And now every designation, there are women and women and women. What held them back for 62 years? It is that position of disadvantage. It is social, it is educational, it is economic. Now, the economic backwardness has also become a constitutional criteria. The 103rd Amendment has been ratified and has been put in force. And of course, it is before the Supreme Court now. The Supreme Court has yet to pass orders on whether it has to be heard by a constitution bench or not. It has not stated. Now, to my mind, economic backwardness is something which is covered by directive principles. So a policy may be made, but then that policy is subject to judicial review as to whether it has a not objective. So the 10%, and this was exactly what Narasimha Rao had done during the immediately after VP Singh's notification came Narasimha Rao's notification, where he said 10% for economically backward also. Exactly the same thing has now been passed in January 2019 by this government, providing for 10% reservation for economically backward. Essentially, the criteria is people who have less than 8 lakhs of income per year will be given 10% seats. And there is a constitutional amendment. I mean, I could have understood it to be a horizontal reservation, but they are putting it in the vertical reservation area. So let us see what comes out of that, because to my mind, economic backwardness to some extent may be linked to your social condition. But many a times people just don't work, they just don't, they're just plain lazy. So that cannot be the only criteria for reservation. So what I want to actually say today is that we should be balanced when we look at this. We should not be elitist, and we should make place for people who have been disadvantaged. And at the same time, ensure that merit is not compromised. Thank you.
Thank you, Vibha ma'am. Very well explained and rightly said that our constitution is the most valuable and vital one. But my whole focus was on 33% reservation. So I will request, let's, on behalf of SCWLMMU and our president, ma'am, let's follow this 33% reservation if something can be done there. And
yes,
now
we must not agitate for it because it's a very valuable aspect. And
yeah,
as we have seen in COVID, the nations which have been led by women are COVID-free.
that's right.
Your nations which have been led by women are COVID-free, whereas the rest of the world is still grappling.
So looking forward, ma'am.
In fact, the bill was introduced in Lok Sabha, in 2008, but it was passed by the Rajya Sabha in 2010.
Rajya Sabha, yes.
And, yes, and 10 years have elapsed, and still there is nothing on women's reservation. So I think we should take it forward.
Yeah.
Under yes, under Vibha ma'am's guidance, we all should take it forward.
Yes, ma'am, agree. And now,
Yeah, but now,
yes, please, ma'am, please, ma'am.
no, the thing is that is still not in the judicial realm. It is still in the realm of the legislation. So basically, there has to be a movement to have it passed.
It's lack of political will, I guess.
There is no political will at all, because they always perceive women as puppets, and that's how Indira Gandhi came to power. That's how Lalu Prasad Yadav's wife came to power. So women are supposed to act at the instance of men. So there is no independent action. So this 33% is a difficult one.
But I feel, ma'am, we can do something. Let us think about it.
Of course, sure, definitely.
Thank you, ma'am. And now I will request Priyanka Mathur to kindly take question answer session, please. Over to Priyanka.
Thank you, Prerna. Although ma'am has explained everything, but still there are few questions. I think some of them are repeated also. So ma'am, my first question from the viewers is, reservation on the basis of caste was incorporated by the founding father of the constitution only for first 10 years. It has been there for last 70 years. Do you think it should continue further?
I have already spoken on this, and my view, because you see, these are views which we get from our personal experiences. And these are views, like I said, which depend on where you stand in society. In my view, if one looks at it as a progressive and liberal measure, I think that till such time that the inequality is eradicated, these provisions will continue to be vibrant, they will continue to be useful. Because there's no point doing it doing an unfinished job. You've done it for 70 years because the forces have been so strongly against it that a job which was perceived to have completed in 10 years has not been completed so far. So it needs a lot more political will, it needs a lot more social change, it needs a lot of educational upliftment. It's basically because people themselves don't have equality in their hearts that we are continuing to face this. The moment people become more equality minded, this problem will abate on its own.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is from our Assistant Secretary, Mansa Singh. Mansa, please go ahead with your question. Unmute yourself.
Can't hear.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hello, how are you?
Ma'am, I have a question. Whether you very well, but I have a very small question. Has Indira Sahni judgment been rendered meaningless after grant of EWS reservation, breaching the 49.5% limit as per central government?
Your voice is breaking a little bit. Can you just repeat your question?
Should I repeat again?
Yes,
Has Indira Sahni judgment been rendered meaningless after grant of EWS reservation, breaching the 49.5% limit?
Yes. See, the spirit of the judgment, I don't think has been rendered useless. But this is again balancing which needs to be redone. It's recalibrating which needs to be done, because the judgment in principle is very clear. And to my mind, it still holds very good ground and is actually the basis for all the future judgments. So the breach of 50% is something that the courts have to re-examine and must deal with it very strictly. To my mind, the courts must maintain that 50% benchmark.
My next question from the viewer is, Ma'am, how effective is reservation system in India? Because there is no substantial evidence to show it has filtered to the last person in the line. In fact, the deserving people are unable to avail the facility, the benefits.
No, I disagree with that because I have seen, I mean, I have personally come across a lot of people who would not have had the opportunity, but have had the opportunity. You look at your civil services, there are persons from all kinds of castes now working shoulder to shoulder. There you look at your medical services. In fact, a big problem is with regard to engineering colleges and medical colleges. But the thing is that when you go to government hospitals, you realize that a doctor is as good or bad as the other doctor. Just from a particular caste, a doctor doesn't become good or bad. It is how much a doctor, how capable a doctor is. And I have come across some very fine doctors who have been able to get into these positions because of their reservation and have been able to deliver. So I don't think that the reservation definitely it creates a lot of heartburn for people who have half a mark higher. But that half a mark higher is nothing in comparison of 2,000 years of disadvantage position. So it's a compromise, and it is something which has a very noble purpose.
Thank you. The other question is again a bit repetition. Should there be a creamy layer criteria in reservation policy system?
Certainly, absolutely. Because as I just said, that once that advantage has been, a disadvantage has been overcome, then you are not entitled. Then you have to fight for whatever you're fighting for, whether it's a government job or a seat in an educational institution, purely on merit. For example, let me tell you, for example, for all the top posts, wherever there are directors of institutions, where the post is the single top post, there is no reservation. So there is also a kind of a mathematical arrangement which is brought in. And for the top post, there is never, of course, a person may walk faster to get to the top post, but there is no reservation.
Okay. So another question from the viewer is, reservation of more than 60% in 4 states of southern India, then 40% in Maharashtra and other states. Will it not affect merit? We are already facing brain drain challenges in India. Is there any policy or ways to stop that?
See, there's no brain drain. Let me tell you that. My 2 children study in USA, but I will tell you that there is no brain drain because the number of people who go from India outside India is minuscule in comparison to the entire population. It is 5% of our citizens who are abroad, which we have seen in this Vande Bharat thing. There were not more than 5% of Indian population who needed to come back. So, brain drain is also one of those very fancy concepts that we have come up with. Today, the mobility, yes, there is mobility. Everybody has a freedom to choose where they want to go. It has to do with your environment, your working environment. And in fact, there has been a reverse brain drain, and everything is connected to the economic condition. In fact, inflow of foreign exchange that comes from the migrants who have gone from, say, Kerala to, say, Dubai or Middle East is very high. In fact, it's a good, I think, 15% of our foreign exchange reserve. So it's not a brain drain. They go there, they work there, they send back money to India. So this is a misconception. We have brilliant people. In fact, I have seen our citizens who go in international conventions who are far superior to any kind of, say,
Yes.
American leaders or intellectuals or something. So
Even my
there is
experience
no,
is that.
yeah, there is no brain drain. It is just a question of opportunity. Today, when India is becoming more and more economically self-reliant, we are having people coming back also. People who have got educated could not get an education opportunity here. They're all coming back.
Yeah.
So,
In fact, COVID, everyone wants to come back to India now.
COVID, you look at all the protectionist measures which are being taken by all the other governments. Who wants to stay in America in this environment? Nobody.
Right. Right. Thank you, ma'am. Another recent 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act reserves 10% of jobs for economically weaker section. This is in addition to existing cap of 50% reservation for SC, ST, and OBC, taking it to 60%. Do you think this act will open Pandora box of state legislation seeking to go beyond the threshold currently pegged at 50%? Like every JAT and everyone wants reservation now.
Well, JAT reservation, we had a very interesting argument over there.
Struck down, yeah.
So that was struck down because we had very, yeah, so because we had been able to exhibit very clearly that there is no social, economic, and educational backwardness of this particular class. So definitely this will open up not a Pandora's box, but it'll give a kind of a handle to all the governments to use it and to misuse it. It definitely breaches the 50% benchmark. And I think the Supreme Court should certainly judicially review this. And I mean, I think constitutionally, the Supreme Court must maintain the 50% benchmark of Indira Sahni and not beyond that, and strike it down as Justice Mishra has just struck down the Andhra Pradesh Act.
Okay. The last question. Reservation has become a tool in the hands of political parties to canvass for vote rather than seeking its objective of a socio-economic equality. Do you agree government should look for some other method to create jobs and educational infrastructure instead of reservation?
See, political parties will use any and every excuse. They are using communalism. They are using religion. They will use caste. They will use anything. They will use, patriarchal measures, all kinds of things that whatever works for them and garners them greater votes. So one party appease the particular section of vote bank, the other party is appeasing the other section of vote bank. So the government always, to my mind, has an ideology. And so to say, I feel that there is always a biased intention in any law that is passed. Because there is some kind of a motive behind it. Whether it is a good motive or a bad motive or a good motive, bad motive wrapped around in a good motive. But it is actually the courts. The gatekeeper of the democracy is the court. The court is what has to determine as to what laws, because the competency of legislation cannot be questioned in as much as, after all, we are a democracy with a universal adult franchise. So the laws, the competency of the legislature, because by social contract theory, we have granted the government, the parliament, the authority to make laws on our behalf. So that being the situation, the legislature will be motivated to pass all kinds of laws. That's kind of a self governance that they apply to themselves and they hold themselves back. But it is the courts who finally determine whether the legislation is compliant with the constitution or not. And it is for the judiciary to uphold the constitutional value finally and to be the final arbiter. And that is the hope of the people, that the judiciary will not fail them.
Thank you, ma'am. And what do you think about these startups, ma'am? These startups are one way to,
Startups,
create some justice for the people who are not getting reservation.
startups in connection to reservation.
Not reservation, like this general public can avail those from government, those facilities, like government is giving nowadays start.
See, that is all policies of the government. Those are all voluntary measures that if the government feels like giving out things, those are privileges. They
Yes.
are not, there's a distinction between legal rights and privileges. So if the government wants to give out certain privileges, which is not violative of our principles of equality, then there is no problem in that, because those are measures which the government has a duty to take. For example, the farmers' loans, they have
Yes.
to waive off the farmers' loan. It is for the purpose of alleviating the problems of a particular. Yeah.
Right.
So there I don't see much of a problem. It's one of those help measures, I would say, until and unless somebody else is being disadvantaged.
Right.
So that has to be seen.
Thank you, ma'am.
I don't see a problem with it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Over to Prerna.
Priyanka,
Yes.
Priyanka here, I also want to say something
Okay,
to Vibha ma'am.
please.
Vibha ma'am, I feel reservation laws, they should be reviewed every 3 years, because otherwise it will go for eternity. Like it has been 70 years now. So I feel the government should review these policies every 3 years or 5 years, the way there used to be 5-year plans. Something should be there so that it can be gradually eliminated.
So we have commissions. We have commissions who do review all the policies. They do review the fact whether there are what are the injustices, which castes to bring it into the schedules. Basically, we have to identify every OBC caste also. So that process takes place. However, the thing is that you can't be reviewing things. Once a law is passed, then it is passed till such time that it is either set aside or repealed. So, there can't be a review of a law. A law is a law.
But ma'am, one thing, the abuse of this system, that should be checked. I mean,
That's
by
what
reviewing, Bhakti meant like the abuse which is happening, like creamy layer taking the advantage, even after becoming like, even after having income more than 8 lakhs, they are still taking advantage of the.
So that is what I'm saying, that
Yeah,
finally,
this should-
whenever the law is challenged in the courts have to take on that role and keep up their angle and be true to the Constitution and hold according to the Constitution, not according to either of the parties' interests.
So anyone else? Any question? Thank you. Now over to Prerna.
Thanks, Priyanka. Now I will request Ms. Subhra Saha to conclude the session with vote of thanks.
Good evening, everybody. This is Subhra Saha, Advocate, Supreme Court of India. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of Supreme Court Women Lawyers Association, I thank to our keynote speaker, respected Ms. Vibha Datta Makhija, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, for participating with us. Ma'am, we are really enlightened with your valuable discussion on the topic. I would like to thank our beloved and respected President, Ma'am, Ms. Mahalakshmi Pauli, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, for stimulating us to do our best and standing as a pillar of strength. I like to thank to our General Secretary, Prerna Kumari, Vice President Bhakti Pasrija Sethi, another Vice President Priyanka S. Mathur, Assistant Secretary Mansa Singh, Treasurer Sudha Pal, Member Executive Maharevish Rain, the entire Executive Committee of SCWLA who work hard to make this event successful. I again thank to our esteemed viewers and participants who joined us and took out time from their busy schedule. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank everyone. And Mahalakshmi, special thanks to you.
Special thanks to you, Vibha, for educating us and illuminating us with your knowledge. It was a wonderful session.
It was wonderful.
And you really
Yeah.
explained it really so well. And thank you for taking off time from your busy schedule on a Sunday evening and being with us. And let me tell you also, Vibha, you're a role model to many. So many are going to now study all Jarnail Singh, Rohinton Nariman's Sir Justice's judgment. And they are going to, hopefully, I may bring out an article on this reservation, thanks to you.
Yeah, and let's work towards our 33%.
Yes,
Yes,
for sure.
In fact, it is only because of your support and you telling me to take on ML Sharma and the perpetrators of the Nirbhaya case. I was able to bring them to book. But although the matter is still pending, yes, I set the ball rolling, and the entire credit goes to Vibha. So this is the platform where I can acknowledge your full support to the Supreme Court Women Lawyers Association. Thank you, Vibha. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, ma'am.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.